topic for today, guys, is S16 sales onboarding. Big idea. You need a structured path combining training, role play coaching, and actual sales activities to ensure reps ramp quickly. We're going to talk about the ramp up to quota. We're going to talk about developing a 2-week checklist that maps out everything that a rep needs to do daily to be perfectly on track for that ramp up. And then we're going to talk about kicking things off with a new hire orientation and structuring out the first general 2 weeks so you get a picture of how this all comes together with the university, role play, coaching, etc. The focus here is perfect your 2-week new hire checklist and experience for new reps and implement the training systems we've covered today. So the first thing is the roadmap, thinking through your ramp up. Okay. And this is all about clarity for the leader, the organization, and the rep. As an example, if you have um, let's say that your bare minimum income expectation is, just for the sake of illustration, 100 grand per year, which is roughly 8K per month. Okay. Well, you're recruiting into that, but in most scenarios, reps are not going to be making 8K month one. There's going to be some ramp up timeline, assuming they follow the role and do the job and execute by a certain timeline, they will actually get to the bare minimum income expectations that you've communicated in the recruiting process. But what we do as it relates to onboarding and trying to provide clarity for reps and the organization is we think through, okay, what does the annual income look like, bare minimum for this position that we're recruiting into? Based on the annual income, what does that look like from a monthly income perspective? In this hypothetical example, we've called it 8K. And then lastly, what is the timeline for ramping up into that income? Meaning conservatively, what does it look like from a monthly perspective to hit that income, that benchmark? Every opportunity is going to be different. For an entry-level opportunity or a closer opportunity, it could be a 2 to 4 week ramp-up period. For most of you, you're going to have 60 to 90-day ramp-up periods. For a highly technical, long sales cycle B2B opportunity, it could be a 6 to 12-month period, but it depends. For today's training, we'll just assume what's really common in commission-based sales opportunities, which is 60 to 90-day ramp-up, and we'll use 90 days or 3 months here. So meaning that in this illustration, it's 3 months to ramp up into this 8K per month income. So if a rep follows the 3-month process, they will come out of their 3 months and they'll be making at least 8K. That's the idea. And so we got month 1, month 2, and month 3. And the goal in this example is for them to make 8K in month 3. Okay. 8K in month 3. And we'll reverse engineer the numbers. So if they made 8K in month 3, we're going to go, okay, what did they make in month 2? What's our general assumptions conservatively? Let's just pretend it's 5K. Assuming they did the job properly, they would make, in general, per our model and sales cycle and comp plan, they would make 5K. And what would they make in, month 1? Hypothetically, let's call it 2K. Okay, and that's the ramp up. So we have a 100K bare minimum income opportunity. You can make, which is 8K per month. We're assuming it takes 3 months to ramp up into that income, and obviously month 1 and 2 is not going to be 8K. And in this example, we're conservatively assuming they're making 2K month 1, 5K month 2, and 8K month 3. So that's the next thing that you do. The following thing is understanding, okay, if this is the income right here, what is it that they're doing from an activity perspective, production perspective to accomplish that income? What are they doing weeks 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 to actually accomplish these numbers? So if they show up in week 1, what is it? They need to do A, B, and C. If they show up in week 2, they need to do X, Y, and Z. If they show up in week 3, they need to do 1, 2, and 3. Weeks 4, 4, 5, and 6. And if I come on board and I follow A, B, C, X, Y, Z, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the first 4 weeks, then based on what you've structured, I will make 2K in month 1. And then if I follow the system in weeks 5, 6, 7, and 8, I will make 5K in month 2. And if I follow the systems in weeks 9, 10, 11, and 12, I will make 8K in month 3. So what you're doing is you're understanding the ramp up, the income opportunity, and benchmarking the activities and the expected production weekly for the first, in this example, 12 weeks, so that what it looks like to ramp up into the position is absolutely clear for leadership and the rep. Okay, clarity for commission-based staff is incredibly important. When there's a lack in clarity and they don't know where they're going, then that increases doubt and it kills retention. And so if you recruit them into this income, they need to know, okay, what should I expect month one, month two to get to where I really want it, at least the bare minimum, based on the timelines you've suggested. So they need to know, okay, all I need to do is do this in week one, week two, week three, week four. And if I do that, I'm going to make at least 2 grand. Okay. And that that's clear. And then they commit to the income and have an expectation of that income, then you're good. But you have to have the clarity. This is a helpful tool for onboarding. So this is kind of macro. Okay. Then the second topic for onboarding structure is thinking through kind of the micro, specifically the first 2 weeks. So this helps you understand at a high level whether you're onboarding, ramp up as 1 month, 2 month, 3 months, 6 months, whatever. For most of you, it's going to be 1 month, 2 month, or 3 months. For some, 6+ months. But this helps you understand macro the requirements that a rep needs to do to hit the benchmark, the income benchmarks. Okay. Now, what you do in the first 2 weeks is I come back here and I go, okay, the expectation is that they need to, at a high level, do A, B, and C and X, Y, Z in the first 2 weeks to be on track for this ramp up plan. Okay, let's get a little bit more granular and talk about the first 2 weeks: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Friday. Weeks two: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And then what we start to do is we start to build out a checklist. Okay, if they're going to accomplish this from an activity perspective in the first 2 weeks, how do I actually need to draw that down or map that out daily so it's absolutely clear? The first 2 weeks need to be like a perfect experience for the reps, and there needs to be absolute clarity on what they need to do. If they get through the first 2 weeks, then you're really on track for an organization to potentially have a retained rep. And so you go, okay, based on what I've drawn here, macro in the weeks 1 and 2, if I go a little bit micro and focus on the first 2 weeks with the intention to build out a 2 week new hire checklist, what is it? What exactly in those first 2 weeks needs to happen on Monday to ensure that they're perfectly on track for Tuesday? What needs to happen on Tuesday to be perfectly on track for Wednesday? And that's like the activities that they need to do. And what you start to build into your checklist is the sequence that they need to follow to participate in training, to participate in the sales team meetings, and do XYZ sales activities. So as an example, Monday, show up to new hire orientation, go through modules 1, do 5 role plays, do this, do this, do this, do this. Tuesday, show up to the team meeting, go through modules 2, do 5 role plays, do this, do this, do this, do this, right? And you're building a sequence. So I know as a rep, I got to do these 7 things to be perfectly on track for Tuesday. And so that's the second topic for today is you want absolute clarity. And it's these first 2 weeks that kind of allow reps to plug into the system and get a grasp for what's going on and have an organized experience. So they come out of those 2 weeks understanding how to execute at the rest of the ramp up period. But the first 2 weeks need to be very specific because that's where they kind of get a hold of executing within your sales model. How do I participate in the team with the team? How do I execute with the university role play or whatever resources that you have available? How do I plug into the CRM? So the first 2 weeks need to be very, very cookie cutter. And when you have this clarity, then there's no confusion. It's here's the process, follow the process. If you don't follow the process, you're not a part of the team. Okay, so that's the second topic is building out a 2 week new hire checklist. So you build out the macro and you understand those numbers. So there's clarity for the rep in the organization. And then you focus on the first 2 weeks and understanding that those 2 weeks need to be an incredible experience. This is when they get a grasp of the role, the organization, the sales team meeting structure, what it is to be a part of the organization, plugging into the university if you have that, plugging into role play. By the way, the macro, micro things, these things still apply even if you're not automating your training, right? This is, you still need to structure onboarding even if you're doing these things live. And then after you've organized the first 2 weeks and you've got everything mapped out from a ramp up perspective, and potentially you have your university automated, role play automated, and coaching systems ready to execute at scale, then it's Then it's bringing reps into this process, providing clarity on how to execute the first 2 weeks and letting them do it or not. Okay, so we're going to finish off with discussing kind of the first 2 weeks from a schedule perspective to really kind of paint a picture of what this could look like for you and talk about, kicking things off with new hire orientation. And so let's draw a week up here: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Now, for the sake of this illustration, I'm going to assume that we have training automation, specifically the university and the role play, meaning that that's not going to be a time investment from leadership, and therefore I'm not going to draw it up on the calendar. You can look at this as like your calendar, okay? And your time investment in the onboarding process, assuming you have these resources set up. Well, typically, a company would onboard a rep and they would have, a few hours a day, a few hours a day, a few hours a day, all the way Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and they're wasting 15 hours or whatever the time investment is. Well, we're getting rid of that ideally with the university. And then that time would just increase, assuming a company was providing role play. So those things are eliminated, which reduces leadership workload. And I'm going to draw up kind of the bare minimum schedule from a leadership perspective on how you onboard reps. And let's paint a picture. So on Monday, we're going to call this new hire orientation. New hire orientation. And for the sake of illustration, you're going to do 1 to 5 sales team meetings a week, and that's preference based, and depends on a bunch of different things. But for the sake of this example, just so you understand kind of the meeting and the time investment piece for leadership, I'm just going to assume we're doing sales team meetings on Tuesday and Thursday for an hour. Okay, so we got new hire orientation from 10 a.m. to 12 on Monday, and Tuesday and Thursday sales team meetings for an hour at 10 to 11. The last piece up here, which is ideal, this is a way to support reps at scale with saving time, is we love having clients do end of day meetings, okay, in the first 2 weeks. And the end of day meetings is one of the many things that goes on the 2-week new hire checklist. Every detail that a rep needs to execute is on the 2-week checklist, okay? Now, if you can imagine having your university in role play, and that's part of the tasks that reps are doing outside of the actual meetings that they're involved in, well, in those first 2 weeks, they're still going to have a lot of questions. If I'm going through the university, if I'm going through role play, if I'm following the checklist, that's amazing, but I'm still going to need some Q&A support. And the best way to do that is to push that into a group coaching environment at the end of the day, as an example, from 5 to 5:30 p.m. or whatever's best. You don't have to do every day, but that's kind of the best to maximize support. It's reasonable to execute from a leadership perspective. But assuming you did that, this would be kind of the management time investment for new hires, which is probably a lot less than you've done in the past. You pump reps into new hire orientation for a couple hours. You give them absolute clarity on what it looks like to follow the 2-week checklist. And then they come out of new hire, orientation, and they're following the checklist. And then they show up to the end of day meeting and ask questions. And then the next day, in this example, they go to their sales team meeting, and then they follow the checklist, whatever that looks like. And then they show up to the end of day meeting to ask their questions. And then they show up to Wednesday and they follow the checklist. And they show up to the end of day meeting to ask their questions. And that's kind of the sequence. And then at the end of the week, you have 25 to 30 tasks that they are supposed to follow per the checklist, and they either follow the system or not. New hire orientation, university, role play, XYZ activities, add 10 leads to the CRM, make 10 calls, show up to the end of day meeting, whatever it is, right? Whatever the activities, the training steps are, the meeting involvement is, that's what's on the checklist. Any administrative things that are important for them to do, everything that they need to do to be perfectly on track for success in the first 2 weeks is on the checklist. Then you pump reps into new hire orientation. And the core purpose there, assuming you've set up a good onboarding system, which is kind of what we've been covering today, is the goal is for them to have absolute clarity on what they need to do for the first 2 weeks. So nothing is ambiguous, right? You recap, you do a round robin, have everybody introduce themselves. You recap on what it looks like to ramp up over the first 90 days, whatever that looks like. So there's clarity and expectations there. Then you focus on the micro and you dial in, primarily in this new hire orientation meeting, you dial into the new hire checklist and walk through every single day and help them understand that new hire orientation everything that they're going to do daily, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday for the first 2 weeks. And you do Q&A, make sure that they have access to all the resources that they need access to so that by the time new hire orientation is done, there's absolute clarity, right? They're either going to follow the system, the checklist, and handle it like big boys, big girls, or they're not going to follow it. But there's absolute clarity by the end of this meeting. So the only thing left for them to do is to follow the system that you've created. Checklist, 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 end of day meeting. Sales team meeting, checklist, 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 end of day meeting. And that's the process. And you've provided perfect structure. You've provided clarity on what they need to do, and they either follow it. And so they're not bugging you here, right? They're just new hire orientation, sales team meetings, end of day meetings, and they're following the process or not. And you onboard reps, whatever the number is, I don't care. You can recruit 20 reps, 200 reps, it doesn't matter. But what's common is, a company maybe hires 5 reps, right? 4 show up to new hire orientation. Okay. 2 of them do not follow the process by the end of week 1, which means you get it down to 2 reps going into week 2. And then, to answer your question, Greta, at the end of that week, you probably have roughly a 50% retention rate, right? And so you got Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. This is week 2, and it's the same schedule, okay? But there's no new hire orientation because they already did that in week 1. So we have the sales team meeting that we did. That's just a team meeting function. And then we have our end of day meetings, Monday through Friday. And they show up to Monday, those 2 reps who made it or whatever the number is, and then they're following the checklist. Boom, 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 right? And then by the end of this week, 25 to 30 tasks. 1 out of those 2 haven't made it. You have 1 rep that makes it out of the 2 weeks, and you got a rep, right? And they followed 50 tasks plus in the first 2 weeks. So that's how you really bring all of this together. And it's the university and role play that eliminates, 20 plus hours a week in leadership work. When you pull all of this together, again, redundant, but that's what radically impacts retention rates by 2 minimum and up to 5x, while also reducing the leadership workload by 80%. And so that's S16 out of the S20 sales team operating system, sales onboarding. And the big idea here is you need a structured path for combining training, role play, coaching, sales activities, whatever reps need to do daily. And we talked about the ramp up, the 2-week checklist, and kind of new hire orientation, the schedule. The big focus for what we just covered was perfect your 2-week new hire onboarding process, the ramp up, all those things, ideally, on top of automated training, and it'll radically transform your onboarding process and retention rates.